In this video, I'm gonna go through the basics of gravel tires, and I'm gonna sprinkle a few things you may not have known about them. Typically, when you talk about gravel, you talk about multi-terrain cycling. And gravel tires are optimized for multi-terrain. They aren't the fastest on tarmac, they aren't the fastest off-road, but when the route is a mixture of both, gravel tires are the best choice. We're going to touch on the 4 characteristics of a gravel tire: tubeless compatibility, ideal tire widths, tread patterns, and puncture protection. At this point, it is fair to say that tubeless is a prerequisite to any off-road riding. While we are on the topic of tubeless, here's a quick tip. It may be worth learning how to set up a tire tubeless. You can find so many videos of that online. But for me, a key piece of equipment is the tubeless inflator pump and a wheel set that does not require rim tape. It's going to make your job a lot easier. Now let's talk about gravel tire widths. Widths. It's kind of a weird word to say. Thinner tires like the 30mm adventure road tires are more suitable for crappy pavement than anything off-road. 32 to 35mm tires, for me, is the sweet spot if you do mostly road riding with sprinkles of off-road. You are riding this width if you like to go fast on the road but still be fairly capable off-road. 36 to 40mm tires seem like the standard for most gravel racing. They are fast and capable off-road and don't sacrifice too much on tarmac. Anything bigger than a 40mm tire is for when the terrain becomes really rough. Something borderline mountain bike territory. While we are talking about tire width, a quick note about 700C and 650B tires. A few years ago, there was more debate as to which wheel set to use because bikes couldn't fit super wide tires, so they would choose 650B for wider options. But these days, modern gravel bikes fit much wider 700C tires now, like clearance for 50mm meets. Generally speaking, 700C rolls faster and 650B feels a lot more agile, especially off-road. Now let's talk tread patterns. I like to think of tread patterns as a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have slick tires. They have nearly continuous and smooth tread patterns. Examples would be the Panaracer Gravel King slicks. They're fast on the road, but probably slippery off-road, especially at speed. Then you have the slicks with the knobs on the sides, like the WTB Byway, still fast on the road, but the side knobs help with cornering. Then something with even more knobs, but still a relatively continuous middle, like the Maxxis Ramblers, the WTB Riddlers, and even the Kenda Flint Ridge. Then, for the really rough conditions, consider tires like the Kenda Booster Pros or tires that have even bigger knobs for wet conditions like the WTB Senderos. One thing to keep in mind though, if you do use a tire that has a lot of knobs on it and you use it mostly on the road, those knobs are going to start looking like slicks pretty quickly. So which tread pattern should you go for? The answer to that is not very straightforward. The truth is that you can go through pretty much any sort of gravel with any tread pattern, especially if you're running a 40mm tire. So generally speaking, you want a smoother tread if you do more road than off-road. The knobbies will give you better control off-road but are a tad slower on the tarmac. But real consideration comes when you balance terrain, speed, and rider ability. So we already talked about terrain, so let's get to speed because speed matters. The smoother tread will become more difficult to maneuver than the knobbies off-road. At speed, smoother tires tend to slip off-road, especially when maneuvering through corners, while the knobbies will be a tad slower on the road compared to slicks. And now we get to rider ability. This is something that is not talked about as much. Some riders just have better bike handling skills and are more comfortable with the slight penalty of slicks on rough terrain. They may prefer the speed bonus of a slicker tire and don't mind the grip penalty. So base your decision on these three aspects: terrain, speed, and rider ability. If you're new to all of this though, a good place to start would be a semi-knobby tire like the Maxxis Ramblers or the WTB Riddlers or the Kenda Flint Ridge. You can't go wrong with that middle of the spectrum choice. One final consideration when choosing your gravel tire is puncture protection. It can get a little bit confusing, so bear with me. Let's take a look at the Kenda website. Notice that on the Kenda website, protection has two types, GCT and TR. In Kenda's case, this means gravel casing technology, while TR means tubeless race. GCT is the one with an extra layer of protection, while TR does not have that extra layer. The downside of that extra layer of protection is that it is heavier. That's why they market the TR as a race option, because the added weight of the GCT means it is slower. A lot of the brands have some sort of extra layer of protection in their tires. If this matters to you, you can look out for it in their marketing. Some examples are Panaracer's ProTite Shield Plus or WTB's SG2. Presumably, the extra layer of protection makes it slower and a little less comfortable. If this is not an obvious choice for you, if you're still on the fence about puncture protection, I'm guessing that you are leaning more towards a comfortable, faster tire. And honestly, I feel like for most situations, the tubeless sealant seals a lot of the holes that a tubeless tire gets, unless it is a big scratch on the sidewall. And in that case, it's hard to say if that extra layer of protection is going to help you there. So personally, I don't feel squeamish about choosing the race version of these tires for most of my riding. Okay, we're going to talk about a few more things you may not have known about gravel tires, but first, let's get to my vlog sponsor, Cycle Meeting. Cycle Meeting is the best Philippine online shop where you can buy yourself a bunch of really nice bike accessories. In fact, many of the tires mentioned here, notably the WTBs and the Panaracers, those were procured via Cycle Meeting. So visit facebook.com/Cycle Meeting today and buy yourself something nice. Thank you, Cycle Meeting, for sponsoring this vlog. Okay, let's get back to the things you didn't know about gravel tires. Tire pressure matters. Factors such as system weight, which is the rider and the bike, actual tire width, personal preferences, and importantly, the type of terrain that you will be riding on will determine the ideal tire pressure. I like to look at this chart that I found on the NV website, and then I'll get to that ballpark figure, and depending on the terrain and depending on the route and depending on how I feel, I might fine-tune that PSI figure from there. While the tires matter, the truth is you could probably ride gravel with whatever tire that you have on your bike right now, because you can pretty much roll over anything with any type of tire. Road cyclists have been going off-road well before gravel became a thing. But the width and tread start to matter if you decide to go fast. So you can definitely do gravel with a 700x28 setup, but it'll be a ton more fun and fast if you do it with a 700x40. And here's another thing. People often forget that tire sealant dries out once they are in the tire. So make sure to check your tire sealant every now and then, maybe every 2 to 3 months, or maybe if you have a major puncture, just double check if you still have sealant in there. You can probably shake the tire and just hear if there's something sloshing inside. And as I mentioned, gravel is not a good name for this genre of cycling, but I guess it has a better ring to it than mixed terrain cycling. While we use gravel as a catch-all term, the truth is not all gravel roads are the same. Here are a few examples. Like this one, most people think of gravel as something like this, like a hard-packed dirt road. But the truth is, there's so much more different types of gravel around. Like here is the limestone in Cebu, Philippines. Here's the volcanic sand in Clark. Here are the irrigation roads in Nueva Ecija. So choosing a gravel tire will depend on what kind of gravel you decide to do. One last thing that I want to talk about is, of course, the look of a gravel tire matters. My favorite tire by far were these hot pink Gravel Kings. It made me excited to get on the bike, and anything that gets you jazzed to ride your bike is good in my book. Let me know in the comments if you have any snippets of knowledge, of information about gravel tires that I may not have mentioned in this video. I would love to read about them. And also, if you enjoyed this video, you might like this playlist that I made talking about the different gravel tires that I have tried throughout the years. Check it out. Alright, no boring days. Please subscribe.